Welcome to the Transformation Debrief. I'm Chris Hood, a digital strategist at Google Cloud and your host. In each episode, we aim to stir visionary thinking and share unexpected insights on transformation initiatives and lessons learned along the way. TELUS is a dynamic, world-leading communications and information technology company with $17 billion in annual revenue and over 17 million customer connections spanning wireless, data, voice, television, entertainment, security, healthcare, and more. To discuss this powerful company and their journey through technology and the cloud, I am joined by two powerful guests. Would you both share a little bit about yourselves and your roles at Google and TELUS?
Hello, everybody. Very nice to be here. Thank you, Chris, for having us. My name is Amol Phadke. I work with Google Cloud. I am the managing director and GM responsible for our telecom business across cloud. We work with pretty much all of our global clients, including, of course, TELUS, who's a very, very strategic partner to us.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Chris, for having me here today. My name is Hisham Fahmy, and I'm the Chief Information Officer at TELUS. I'm ultimately responsible for delivering on TELUS's goal of being, delivering humanized digital experiences and being a technology provider, providing a better future for all Canadians. And so I'm responsible for all that build and operation of all the technology behind the scenes that makes that happen.
When you think through the transformation journey, how do you view cloud in general as part of that? Because clearly, in my mind, cloud is one of the many enablers. It's not the enabler, although it's an important topic. So I think your perspective would really help in terms of how you view cloud as part of that overall transformation.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question, Amal. There's no doubt cloud has a huge part to play in our journey, and is one of the pillars, if you will, right, or cornerstones of what we're trying to build on. But at the end of the day, cloud is just a tool. It's a means to an end, right? And so when we look at it, I with working with my teams a lot, we try to focus less on it's about the technology or cloud and more about what are we doing and why are we doing it? What are the outcomes we're trying to drive, right? And that's what we got to focus and optimize for. And so when you realize, okay, when we're saying our digital transformation, what we're really trying to optimize for is how do we deliver value faster, right? How do we create more experiences faster, have a faster time to market, really shorten our lead times? How do we maintain the high level resilience? The key thing is using it the right way. There's a lot of people who use cloud, but they just kind of replicate the sins of the past or what they did in their data center. But again, when you ground it in what you're trying to get outcomes, then cloud becomes a great enabler, as does a lot of tooling, whether it's your CI/CD platforms and that you do there, right? Whether it's in some of the design tools you do in your design systems. And so each of these are a tool that play on that kind of three-legged stool, if you will, of the outcomes that we try to put together.
I think it's really interesting to go down the path of your tools and enablements, and then, as you said, making sure that your teams are actually happy in the process. When we think about time to market, and maybe you think about this in the same way, we may tend to rely heavily on our teams to make sure we get to market faster, not really think about it as the technology being the one that helps us get to market faster. So how are you balancing your team happiness and ensuring that you're able to meet some of those goals?
Well, I think, at the end of the day, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not at the expense of, if you focus on the happiness, then you might delay your goals. I think they actually lead together, but you have a bit of a dip in the beginning as you build that capacity, but at some point things accelerate and you start realizing you're getting much more better and repeatable and predictable at doing that. But what we kind of focus on is what do you measure, right? And when you get there. And so we look at, how do you measure your time to market, right? What is it that you're trying to measure? Is it your lead time from an idea to how I get it production? Do I say when I have some code in there, how long does it take to get it out of production? Can I experiment? Can I do things in smaller batch sizes that allows me to get that flexibility that nothing is too big to fail? And I can have small degradations that no one really notices.
I really wanted your thoughts on how you approach things when things are not going well. Because even at Google, we often have issues And we then have to sort of always ensure we put in practices like blameless retrospectives and really have safe zones and so on to try and understand quickly how we can actually learn from what has happened, move on, and then do something better, right? So I think your thoughts, because generally that's a tricky area, in terms of when things are not going well and how you sort of rally the troops.
Yeah, 100%. And you hit the nail right on the head, right? Like, I mean, we are huge fans of the SRE, principles and practices and everything. And as you said, one of the biggest tenets of that is the notion of blameless retros and psychological safety. And I think that's the most important thing, right? Is how do you create that? If you really want a culture of continuous improvement, then you have to have this culture saying, hey, mistakes can be made, but then how do we actually quickly, look at these mistakes, learn from them? And the key thing is to learn from them, right? How do we actually learn from them? So then in order to learn from them, we have to be vulnerable and say, okay, well, this was the mistake. This is where it went wrong. And it could be me and it was my fault and everything, but here's what led to it, right? And so that's probably the most important thing, is creating that psychological safety to do that.
That process, and especially psychological safety, I think is critical to the culture, especially around innovation and continuous improvement like you've talked about. But I'm curious, from an onboarding or a hiring process, is there a way that you look at that when you're bringing on new individuals to your teams?
I think one of the things we just look through is, a couple qualities we want to see. And first is that, do the candidates that join us have intense curiosity? And that's because that's a big thing. Like if you're not curious, then you're not always going to question, and you're not open to question everything. So one thing we look for is the curiosity, and do they have that curious nature? The other one we look for is, are they humble? Because again, to create to be vulnerable, you need to be humble, right? And you need to have, leave the ego and check it at the door and say, hey, there's humility, a mistake was happened, whether it's myself or my team. So that's another quality, that we look for.
Obviously, in your role as Chief Information Officer, you also are constantly scanning the industry for what are the next set of things to come your way, whether technology trends, customer trends, market trends, etc. What would you see, based on all of your experience, are the top 2, 3 big trends that you think as an industry is hitting us, and what we need to do about them?
If I kind of take the horizon 1, 2, 3 kind of view on things, right? What would I say is, horizon 1 that we have that's kind of hitting our industry is the intense cloudification that's happening, right? And that real adoption of cloud. I think a horizon 2 is where everything is as code. Everything is as code, right? And so code becomes the one commodity that everything is transferred in. And so when you think of it, that's all infrastructure as code, that's all your testing as code, everything is codified. And then if I think of like on a horizon 3 and beyond, I mean, that's really a crystal ball and where it goes. But what piques my interest a lot is Web3 and what's going to happen out there. What's happening in the Web3 and the decentralized kind of world is interesting and going to have very big impacts, and it's something we should be then looking at, right? Both anybody who's a technology professional should be looking at it, but I think even more so as a technology provider and a communication provider, service provider, we should look, because there's probably a big role that we'll have to play in that world as well.
It's one thing for us to kind of look forward and predict what we might see in the future. What are your customers, consumers asking you for today?
It's funny. It's like, I think at the end of the day, it's simple human needs. I think customers are asking for us for simplicity, like make their lives easier, simplify their lives, right? Create better outcomes. I think that's what it really boils down to. How do we reduce the friction in their lives? How do we reduce the stress in their lives? Whether that's providing reliable, mobile internet communications, providing security coverage, whether it's home security or online security, but do it again in a way that doesn't add cognitive load to them. It actually takes it away from them. Make it something they don't have to think about. These are all problems we tackle, but I think they all come from those core human needs, right? I think what customers are really just asking for us is give us predictability and give us simplicity, right? Simplify our lives.
So Hesham, you mentioned a lot of things that you've been thinking about through your organization and your own transformative experiences. I'm curious if you've ever had more or less an aha moment in your career.
Well, I've had many of those, right? The aha moments, but I would say probably in my latest journey, when we're talking about, transformation and digital transformation, and just modernization in general and cloudification, I've seen it happen again and again. I saw it happen internally too. Is we immediately start labeling the existing world as legacy, old, archaic, monolithic, and everything, and the future is all what the bright shiny object is, and that's we have to modernize and everything and stuff. And my aha moment is that's probably your biggest roadblock that you're building to your transformation journey, because you're starting things off on the wrong foot, because you're first of all discrediting all the work that was done in the past, and you're almost devaluing all that work that was done in the past. And so I think that's kind of my aha moment, is like it's detrimental to start labeling it and doing that way, right? And instead what we should be doing is embracing it, saying, what we did in the past is what got us to where we are today. And in fact, we wouldn't be here today and trying to think about our transformation if we didn't have the successes of the past. And our transformation journey is really about where do we go from here? It's about how do we go forward, right? And how do we continue to grow and excel?
Thank you, Hesham. Appreciate you being here with us today.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you, Amal. It's been a real pleasure and honor to be here, and appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Hesham. Real privilege to talk to you. Very nice to be here today. Thank you.
If you would like to learn more about TELUS, we have 2 channels for you to explore. At cloud.google.com/transform, we dive deeper into this transformation journey, and you can tune into That Digital Show to hear the extended podcast version of this conversation. And don't forget to hit subscribe and join us again for more visionary thinking and lessons learned on the next episode of The Transformation Debrief.